Hi there.
Good afternoon. So no attendees can enter yet, so it's technically in practice session. So I'll wait another 10 minutes before, 5 or 10 minutes before opening it up. I didn't realize that that was an option until just now.
Mm-hmm.
So how's everybody doing?
Okay.
How am I doing what?
Are you doing okay?
I'm sitting up in my chair. I guess so far.
I'm just hoping my laptop doesn't overheat. We just had a Zoom meeting for WCAC, the board meeting, and I recorded it and I'm downloading that meeting right now. And so my computer is operating very hot at the moment.
That's not good.
No.
We had almost meltdown during one of our meetings.
Yeah, that's making me think with all this, I should get a cooling pad for it.
Yeah. But we had the laptop sitting right behind a projector and it was blowing out hot air right on it. And I didn't realize that until it failed.
I had that at a meeting too, at a
Did ya?
WCAC meeting. I had my laptop right next to the projector and then it just, yeah, shut everything right down.
Live and learn.
Right. So I'm going to share a title screen right now and just make sure that you can see not the presenter mode. And I'm going to change it so all of you are able to share your screens.
Oh boy.
Hey, Lacey, while you're doing that, me signing in twice, does that not allow somebody else to come play along with us today?
Possibly, if we get to that 100 mark, like last week we had 119, but not all at one time. So
Okay.
I think it hovered around that 88 mark. So, and I can keep an eye on the numbers when we start letting people in.
Okay. How about I won't because I don't need it right away? Let me know if we don't reach it because it does make, well, you know what? I'm just not going to do it. I don't need it. We got the Google Doc.
Yeah. So we can keep chatting in the Google Doc.
Yeah, I think that's plenty.
So are you seeing just the slide or are you seeing presenter mode?
I think I see the slide. Next slide, no notes.
Oh, you don't want to see that. So I guess switch my screen around. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that is.
Okay, good. That's why I wanted to do that in practice only mode.
Yeah.
All right. So I suppose, let's see what time we got. I can probably start letting people in soon.
Oops. Nope.
Just letting you know, Paul, so I cannot view the Google Docs when I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
So it'll be just you and Kira in the Google Doc when I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
Put it back.
Huh?
Unless I can open on my phone. I don't want to have too many Wi-Fi things going right now.
I know I'm trying to shut everything down over here too, hoping maybe I won't break up so bad.
I'm gonna start letting people in, and I can keep an eye open for Philomena in case. Or did she make it in? Oh, you're in. All right. All presenters are in. I'll start letting the audience in. Oh, I don't think I added Tina as a presenter this time.
What?
I'll keep an eye out for her. All right.
Why do it?
Nope. Don't want to do that. Okay. People are coming in.
I'm trying this. I got the sparkling water that has caffeine in it.
Ooh, I had that one the other day. Is that the green tea one?
It's black tea.
Ooh, even better.
I know. And I'm just like, I'm going to try this and hopefully I don't stay up all night.
It's still early. You'll be all right.
But if I start talking a little fast, that's probably the reason.
Lord.
So everybody should be able to share their screens without any issues too once I'm done. And actually, so as a panelist, I've enabled it so you're able to override another panelist on sharing your screen. So just a heads up.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Tina Van Zyl, and I currently serve as the president of Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council, often referred to as WCAC. I would like to welcome you today to the Emerald Ash Borer web series. WCAC was established in 2001, and we are a 501c3 organization that provides a forum for 11 Native American tribes in Wisconsin to identify and solve natural resource issues on tribal lands. We have become the voice when speaking to state and federal agencies to address conservation issues. We seek grant funding to address common conservation concerns amongst 11 Wisconsin tribes, as well as promoting outreach and education. And that is how we have come here today to provide this web series. I would like to thank our WCAC Deputy Director / Tribal Pest Survey Specialist, Lacey Hill-Castern, and our Stockbridge Muncie Representative, Paul Cole, and the Forestry Committee for all their hard work and planning to make this training available. This is week 2 of the web series, and the planning team gathered some excellent speakers for today, and I hope it is beneficial to you all. I'd like to also thank the speakers for being a part of this web series. And with that, I will turn it over to Paul Cole.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, like Tina said, thank you, Tina, and welcome to week 2 of the Emerald Ash Borer web series hosted by the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council. We were thrilled last week to have over 100 participants throughout the session, and really excited to see where we head from here. So I'd also like to thank all the people that helped organize this from all over the country. I'd like to thank Lacey for all that she did to take the lead on everything, and Kira for helping out with our Q&A here this afternoon. There's just so many people that helped make this happen, and it's kind of a testament to how many people have come just to watch even in week 1. So why did we decide to create this web series? Even though EAB is detected almost 20 years ago, much of rural Wisconsin is still on the forefront of the invasion. It's still a hot topic for a lot of us, and especially with the recent deregulation. So this is week 2 of the 6-week series, and we're hoping to give a broad overview of the Emerald Ash Borer issue, the ecology, entomology, regulations like this week, and planning, management, and then finish off the series with some of the really important cultural issues. And we hope that people can get a better grasp of the importance of the EAB issue and gather some tools to prepare for the insect and hopefully mitigate damage once the imminent infestation occurs. So each week, if this is your first, we'll have general topic. Last week was EAB 101. If anybody missed last week and would like to see that whole presentation, it is on the WCAC YouTube channel, so you can pull that up. Just Google WTCAC in YouTube. It pops up as the first one. So today we'll be doing regulations and planning. So that'll be interesting. Really excited for the 4 speakers we have today. And I guess as each week we'll be looking at questions and answers period. We'll have all 4 panel, and we can have the viewers ask them questions. Do you have a question? Please type it in the questions and answers chat box Zoom screen. Says chat for technical difficulties, or if you need the whole. So that's let's see. Agenda, speaker bio information, supplemental information will all be posted on the up on the WCAC Facebook page in the future. So I guess we have the rock stars of EAB lined up to help us through this journey. So I guess let's get started. So our first speaker for today is Herb Bolton. Herb serves as the National Policy Manager at the United States Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, Plant Protection and Quarantine, Energy and Domestic Programs in Riverdale, Maryland. His program responsibilities include policy management for the Emerald Ash Borer and biological control, and he is a board certified entomologist with a master's degree in entomology from Rutgers, the State University, and a PhD in entomology from the University of Florida. Please, everybody, let's welcome Herb.
Thank you, Paul. Let me share a screen here. Okay, Paul, can you see that screen?
You have started, but I do not see it yet.
Yeah, it's showing a black screen right now. Okay, here's your PowerPoint.
There we go.
Can you see it? Okay, let me start that in the PowerPoint mode. Okay, is that clear to everybody?
Looks
Yes.
Great.
Good.
Great. Yeah, I've got different screens, so thank you for bearing with me. Well, thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to have us participate, in this webinar series. And my topic for today is the Emerald Ash Borer Program, reviewing, as Paul said, this regulation which began, many years ago, to the recent deregulation for emerald ash borer. So I'd like to cover a number of topics today about emerald ash borer. First, I'd just like to bring everybody up to date on the current status of emerald ash borer and the status of the program. Some elements of the program are ending, the regulatory aspects, and some are continuing. I'd like to review very quickly, but in a way I think that'll show you what was the initial EAB detection when it was first detected in Michigan, and the spread that occurred after that. And I'd like to talk about what EAB program actions have ended, because the regulatory program has ended. But I'd also like to speak to you about what emerald ash borer program activities are going to continue from USDA APHIS in collaboration with our state and tribal partners. And I'd like to point out some recent updates we've made to emerald ash borer resources that you can use for your reference. So to summarize just very quickly what the current status is of the EAB program, in December of this past year, December 15th, 2020, we published in the Federal Register the final regulation for deregulation of emerald ash borer. That was a process that started in 2018 when we had published a proposed rule and we solicited comments from stakeholders. And it was a several year period between 2018 and 2020 when those comments were reviewed and responded to in the December 15th, 2020 Federal Register notice that responded to each of the comments that had come in. And in that December Federal Register notice, we declared that the domestic EAB regulations had ended. And the active date, the effective date of that rule was January 14th, 2021, which was just 2 weeks ago. And that end of the domestic quarantine rules means that such actions that we've done in the past, such as issuing permits to move regulated articles, issuing certificates and engaging in compliance agreements, have ended. And these permits and certificates and compliant agreements were for the movement of emerald ash borer nursery stock, and ash logs, ash raw, green ash lumber, and so forth. But APHIS is changing its approach to addressing EAB. And although the regulatory aspects have changed, the non-regulatory aspects of the program, are continuing. And this is going to allow APHIS to direct available resources toward non-regulatory options for management. And we're going to continue our biological control efforts and integrated pest management IPM research. We also feel it's important to communicate with the public about our outreach on moving ash, firewood, and other firewood into non-commercial pathways. And we're going to keep those efforts in place. Well, as Deb McCullough just really so well covered last week, EAB is a destructive wood-boring pest of ash trees, and it's native to China and other areas of East Asia. It was first discovered in 2002 in the United States in Southeast Michigan, where it was noted that it was attacking healthy ash. However, with some dendrology studies, researchers have calculated that EAB was actually in Southeast Michigan by at least the early 1990s, and it had begun to kill ash trees in the greater Detroit metropolitan area by 1998. The Michigan Department of Agriculture began a quarantine of EAB in 2002. And then the federal quarantine was put in place, matching that Michigan quarantine in 2003. Now, I'd just like to show you a couple maps that just illustrate just what happened from the very beginning. So here's the initial infestation, the counties in red, where EAB was detected at the very beginning. And this is December 2002. This is December 2003, and the map has changed because the blue line is the federal quarantine. And you'll see that there are several yellow counties that they were quarantined, but they did not have known detections. But the first thing you'll notice, the other thing you'll notice is if you look outside the quarantine area, you'll see that there are positive counties inside Michigan and some down in Ohio and even one over in Maryland that were outside the quarantine area. So let's jump ahead about 4 or 5 years after efforts were made to expand the quarantine area. And you'll see that it's quite an expanded area. And again, an attempt to eradicate emerald ash borer. And you'll see that the positive counties for EAB infestations have increased substantially. And once again, maybe not as much at this particular date, but there are infestations outside the quarantine area that were due to spread of EAB. Moving ahead even further to 2012, you'll see that the federal quarantine area was expanded. Again, an attempt to define the range of positive counties and have exercise some control. And the red counties have increased with infested counties increasing. And there's much more of a pattern across many more states developing. In 2018, the federal quarantine had expanded even further. And you can see many more counties positive, and the range of EAB just continued to expand. I'm changing the map on you here. This is the same information, but just in a different view. This is the blue line for the quarantine area. The red dots just represent what was on the previous map as a solid red county. Now it's just a dot. So this was as of January 2021. Another way of looking at that same information, these represent the same red dots for infested counties. And this map is using Forest Service data that shows the approximate range of ash and ash distribution in the dark green areas, and yellow is potential urban ash locations. So this is the same information showing how extensively, as we got to December 2020, emerald ash borer had spread. So now, in January 14th, the federal quarantine, has been removed, and I've removed the blue lines. And from now on, we're going to continue to track, with the help of our partners and any information we can get from surveys, which I'll mention in a minute. We're going to continue to track infested counties because it's important for our stakeholders to know that information, and we need that information for our biological control program. So in summary, over this period from 2002 to 2020, when the final rule was announced in the Federal Register, 35 states and the District of Columbia had EAB infestations. There were 1,680 counties that were within the federal quarantine until the quarantine ended in January. And of those counties, 1,184 had EAB infestations. And that quarantine area was about 876,000 square miles, or about 28% of the contiguous 48 states that had been under EAB quarantine. Throughout this period, from the beginning till the end of the quarantine, the quarantine itself was ineffective in stopping the movement of EAB. The quarantine was to regulate articles in interstate commerce, and EAB continued to be found beyond the quarantine boundaries. And there are a number of factors that I think Deb McCullough touched on last week. But just two of the major factors to consider and why that happened is that the natural spread of EAB was not something you can regulate. And EAB can move at least 100 miles by some estimates during their lifetime. And the quarantine did not regulate non-commercial pathways for ash or other ash products. So in summary, with the EAB program deregulation, we are no longer maintaining EAB domestic quarantine boundaries. We are not approving regulatory treatments for regulated articles that previously needed that treatment to be able to move in interstate commerce. We're not issuing limited permits for regulated articles or issuing certificates to allow movement of regulated articles on a regular basis. We're also not issuing kiln certifications. We're not entering into compliance agreements. And because of that, we're not making periodic physical sites to the facilities we had agreements with. And we're not investigating quarantine violations because there is no quarantine. Now, as a note, I might add that individual states, may have or may be establishing their own state quarantines to regulate movement of ash regulated material. So if you're concerned about interstate movement of materials among states, it's important to contact your state plant regulatory officials for specific information on the specific state EAB regulations, which may still be in place or are going to be put in place. So we will, as I said a few minutes ago, we will continue to track new county infestations. We'll be using some trapping surveys in collaboration with our state and tribal partners, including visual tree surveys. And we will be continuing to identify specimens so that we can keep track of new state and new county EAB infestations. We're going to continue to rear and release EAB biological control agents, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, and continue partnerships for releasing those 4 species of stingless wasps in counties with EAB infestations. I won't go into great detail about the parasitoids. These 3, Spathius galeni, Spathius agrilli, and Tutassicus panaponense, they attack the immatures, the larvae, and Obius attacks the egg of emerald ash borer. And we're going to continue that program, which has been going on for a number of years, to make sure we're carrying out non-regulatory management methods for EAB. In summary, to date, in our biological control program, we, with the help of our partners, have released more than 8 million parasitoids in 30 states and the District of Columbia. We're also continuing our research on integrated pest management strategies for EAB in urban settings and forested settings. And Doug McCullough went into some detail last week about that strategy, and it's where you protect larger trees with pesticide treatments, usually tree injection. And in our case, we're doing research to do the tree injections at the same time releasing parasitoids, trying to see if we can maintain selected trees, mature trees, and at the same time give protection by reducing EAB numbers and by protecting sapling trees so they can survive in future settings. We're also continuing to try to make improvements to biological control at our rearing facility to rear the parasitoids more efficiently. We're going to be providing training assistance for 2 years for kiln certification. And in that regard, helping states or other organizations that want to do their own kiln certification with equipment loan, kiln temperature probes, software temperature data, interpretation for kiln certification. And as I mentioned before, we will be continuing to communicate and outreach to the public through Don't Move Firewood, the Don't Move Firewood campaign on that non-commercial movement of wood that can move EAB. We do have a number of EAB program resources that have been recently updated. You can just Google PPQ EAB and you'll get to the same website, this URL. And on that website, you'll see that there's an updated EAB program manual that was effective January 14th, where all the regulatory aspects of the program have been removed from the manual, but the non-regulatory aspects of the program are still in there and described. Last year, we did revise our manual on biological control releases and recovery of the parasitoids. We also have an update, questions and answers for changes in the approach that we've made as of this deregulation. And another document, a 2-page document on a summary of the biological control program. We do issue some periodic 1 or 2-page EAB reports, either monthly or bi-quarterly, depending upon how much is going on. And they can be obtained from our website or from joining the APHIS stakeholder registry, where APHIS passes information to our stakeholders. If you just Google APHIS stakeholder registry, you'll get this little icon that's shown here. And that link will get you to the same place when when this is recorded. And they give updates. The EAB report gives updates on the status of programs and information for stakeholders and partners. And just a plug for my partners from USDA APHIS, Ben Slager will be talking in week 5 in much more detail about the EAB biological control program. And in week 5, Julie Gould will be talking about our EAB parasitoid treatments, the IPM program research, and all the improvements of the biological control program. So there's much more to come, from those folks who are experts in their areas. And with that, I thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Herb. That was fantastic. Up next, we have Steve Garski. Steve is currently Invasive Species Coordinator for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission in Wisconsin. He coordinated GLIFWC ANA Forest Pest Project from 2013 to 2015. Steve has a bachelor's in science in biology from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and a master's in plant ecology from the University of Minnesota Duluth. So let's please welcome Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Paul?
Yep.
Hello? Okay. I'm no EAB rock star like the people that have talked so far, but I'm a field botanist basically. I started GLIFWC at 2001 doing invasive plant surveys, and 12 years later, I found myself in the middle of this project. So here we go. This presentation is about a risk assessment that GLIFWC did to assess the threats posed by emerald ash borer and other invasive forest beings to natural environments and the Ojibwe treaty resources. It was part of a so-called forest pest project that GLIFWC conducted from 2013 to 2015. And it was prompted by the ever-growing number of forest invasives introduced in North America and the ceded territories. Okay. Here's a map of the Ojibwe ceded territories. These lands were ceded to the United States in the treaties of 1836, 37, 42, and 54. And through these treaties, the tribes also retain the right to hunt, fish, and gather in these territories. And that's a federally affirmed right. GLIFWC, here's a kind of an overview of what GLIFWC does. We assist the 11 member tribes in implementing tribal self-regulation of off-reservation treaty resources. GLIFWC helps the tribes protect habitats and ecosystems that support tribal resources and co-manages these resources with the states. Invasive species pose a serious threat to native ecosystems and the exercise of treaty rights, so that's why GLIFWC has an invasive species program. Treaty resources impacted by invasive species include fisheries, waterfowl, wild rice, cranberries and other wild plants, black ash and other trees, and medicines. personally, I only know a few people in this, but this is Mike Wiggins. He's current chair of Bad River, and he was way back. He was a GLIFWC warden too. And this is, can you see that my hand here?
Yes.
That's April Stonedahl. She's a basket maker on the Bad River Reservation, and she's pounding a black ash log to separate the rings to make strips for making baskets. And I'm sure just about everybody on this in this webinar knows what these are. We like to call these beings because rather than pests, because from a traditional perspective, these introduced insects and diseases are not malicious or bad. They're just carrying out the instructions that the creator gave them, and it's people that messed up and brought them here. So it's a little bit different of a view than most people have. Here are some of the uses, traditional uses for black ash and white ash and green ash. It has a whole bunch of uses. The frames of these are birch bark canoes, but the frames are made from ash and cedar too. Papagamok is the Ojibwe word for black ash, and April Stone told me that it was given this name because it sort of sounds like the sound that used to be heard in the villages, Ojibwe villages in early summer as black ash logs were pounded to separate strips to make these baskets. The arrival of these forest invasives, it affects treaty resources, but it also affects the cultural practices that go with them. So they affect Ojibwe culture as well. If you can't harvest black ash, you can't tell the stories that go with that process. And so that part of the culture could be lost. This project covered a pretty big area. And the first part of it was the risk assessment part. So it began by putting together a long report on the most damaging beings threatening forests of the ceded territories. And I'm probably the one that benefited the most from that process. I learned from experts through their publications, people like David Meck and Robert Hyde, and Deb McCullough was a big one. So I had very good teachers. Okay. These maps, the next thing we did is gather input from tribal elders and harvesters and natural resource staff. And we made these maps, or we ran them off. They were like 3 by 4 feet across. This one shows the LCO reservation, Liquid Array reservation, and surrounding area. And we brought these maps to the meetings, and tribal elders and gatherers and natural resource staff were there. Participants talked about the trees, the habitats and uses, and the stories that surround them. And if they wish, they could mark the areas where they harvested on these maps. And some people, of course, didn't want to do that because they didn't want to give their favorite gathering sites away. But they gave us, they still gave us some good insights into what's being harvested. So another part of the risk assessment involved habitat modeling, so-called. It's a field that's just exploded in recent years, actually the last decade or so, with the exponential growth in computer power. And there's all sorts of approaches and ways to do these models. Up until this, we had used a program called MaxSign. It's pretty popular. And it does a good job under certain circumstances, but it wasn't going to work for this because I didn't have enough emerald ash borer data to train the model and test it. So we went with a different approach. Here's an outline of the process that we used. It was similar to the one used by the U.S. Forest Service Forest Health Technology Enterprise team to produce their national insect and disease risk maps. Factors were like things like distance to nearest EAB infestation, or they could be things like January minimum temperatures or environmental factors that could affect the how fast emerald ash borer showed up at any one spot. So what we did is overlay these layers, and I'll come to the next slide. I'll probably show that better. But we had to rescale the factors for for tree distribution, we scale them from 0 to 10, 0 is where there's no trees, like ash, or 1 to 10 for the environmental factors. Okay, so here are some ash distribution maps for the 3 species that are common across the ceded territories. There's 2 more that barely get into the ceded territory in Lower Michigan, pumpkin ash and blue ash that Deb McCullough talked about, but we didn't map those, of course. We ran these off at an 11.5 by 17 and laminated them and gave them to the tribal natural resource departments and sometimes the warden's offices too, so they could put them up for people to see them. And this is also the data we use to put into our models. And we combine the data from all 3 species. The darker green, the shaded green, it is the more ash there is. So, and units are meter squared per hectare. And it would have been very hard for us to do this ourselves, but somebody had already done it for us, Ty Wilson at the Northern Research Station. So he kindly sent us the data for these. Fortunately, that saved us a lot of work. Here's a close-up of the black ash map, and they seem pretty accurate. I've noticed for white ash, a lot of times range maps will show white ash really being absent from the Western UP and parts of northern Wisconsin, but I live in the Western UP and it's pretty common around here, so I think these are pretty good. Okay, so here's some of the layers we use in our models, just as examples. Okay, and then this looks a little bit complicated. I'll try to, but it's not, but I'll try to run through it fairly quickly. I use this method of Sadie 1977 to rank the factors according to importance. So you have factors you want to put into your model with this method, and you have to rank them in importance. And the idea behind this method is based on psychological research that's been done showing that people are really bad at evaluating the risk to anything, but they're a lot better at ranking factors from most important to least important. So I ranked ash abundance as most important because if you don't have ash, you're not going to have emerald ash borer. Next was distance to EAB. Closer they are to a known infestation, the more likely EAB is to show up, all other things being equal. Human population, you get more people moving firewood and that kind of thing, so that's a risk factor. And the last was distance to nearest main road. So, and then you assign these values to it. So it's a reciprocal matrix, so these cells have the reciprocal of this. And then real quickly, I just changed these to decimal places and added up the sums. And what you need to do is find the normalized principal eigenvector of your matrix, which you really need a statistical program to do that. But you can do a real quick and close approximation by just summing these or dividing these up here by the sum, and then so that they're normalized and they add up, the columns add up to 1, and then finding the average of the rows, and it comes up with a real close approximation of those numbers. So those become the weights. The most important factor has the biggest weight. Next most important has the next biggest weight, all the way down to the least important factor. And these layers have been scaled from 1 to 10. So you just go through this, it's just matrix algebra. You multiply each layer by the weight, and then you divide by 4 in the end to bring it back to a scale of 0 to 10. So it's a lot simpler than it looks. Okay, and here's the result. This is supposedly relative susceptibility to emerald ash borer. And I made this map actually in 2014, like August or September 2014. And the dark green is supposed to show the least probability, lowest probability of emerald ash borer showing up. And then through light green is a higher probability, and then into pink, and finally deep pink, which is high probability, relatively high probability of emerald ash borer showing up. So next one is the same map, but here I've plotted emerald ash borer occurrences. And the green ones are those are from the USDA nationwide monthly maps that Herb Bolton just showed as of 2015. But I made this map in 2014, late 2014, September. And that was, and like a month or two later, this green dot showed up, and that's Rhineland, Wisconsin. They found emerald ash borer on a trap. So that wasn't incorporated into the model. So you can see here, this is supposed to be low probability of emerald ash borer showing up. And soon after I made the map, it showed up in Rhinelander. The yellow dots are basically current. I wasn't able to get that data from Michigan except for here where KBIC sent me their data for the reservation. But Wisconsin and the Minnesota data are current occurrences. So you can look at this and you can see and try to, in some areas the maps, the predictions seem to work out, like around Duluth Superior, but that's because this green point was included in making the map, so it's not too surprising. Other than that, it's kind of a wash, I think. That's the thing about these maps is that, it's just an estimation. Nobody knows for sure. And probably the other thing that happens is they're probably useful after you make them, but after a few years, you start to probably are less reliable. Mille Lacs, we had our meeting there in 2014 with tribal members, and they were very worried at the time about people coming up from Minneapolis bringing firewood. It's a resort area and there's a casino there and it's pretty busy, but it looks like they've been lucky so far. Okay. And beyond that, beyond the maps, we did a limited amount of trapping in 2013 and 2015. Back then, the USDA had a stratified random sampling method across this whole area. So we put these traps in high risk areas like, for example, this is Lake Ogeeba County Park, Lake Ogeeba State Park, Ontonagon County Park, and the Berglund boat landing. And all four have pretty big campgrounds. These are mostly Ottawa National Forest campgrounds. And also we put them a few other places. 2013, I took some up to KBIC. And here's Cody Hataja putting a trap up on the reservation. And here's Jerry Jondro putting a trap up. And he had to take like 3-4 shots with a rock and a rope to get the rope over this branch way up there, but he did it. Here's one I put up in Berglund. This is not one of our trap trees, but it's a famous tree. It's outside the little town of Radisson, which is southeast of the Coudray Reservation and southeast of Hayward too. And that was like the third or fourth site that emerald ash borer showed up in northern Wisconsin. So I ran over there and found the exact tree. It's a white ash, and there's a few smaller white ash by it. But it just goes to show you that they can show up anywhere. This is basically the middle of nowhere, and bang, there it was. So, okay, made a whole bunch of outreach materials, including some of the last things we made were these pamphlets, and they have a backside too, but I just have the front page on them. And we tried to distribute these as much as we could. Over here on the right is Postal Service bags with roughly 2,500 pre-sorted mailings. And they're sitting on the back steps of the Ashland Post Office ready to be shipped out. So we stuffed all those 2,500 mailings, and Lynn Posinski of the PIO department did the pre-sorting. So it's a lot cheaper to mail that way. So okay, we made some posters, and a lot of these pamphlets and posters are still available. If you're interested, you can download. If you go to the GLIFWC site and you go to the Forest Pest link in the lower right, and then find your way to the educational materials, they're all up there. So, what else here? We also made these, and these are great. They're 12 by 18 aluminum signs. Zungi Leith came up with the general design, and then the place that we went to get them made helped her put it into this form. And we sent these to tribes to put up along the roads into the reservations and places like tribal campgrounds, high use areas, power grounds. And we also got some up, like I got one up at Sylvania Wilderness, the entrance in the Ottawa National Forest, and the entrance to Copper Falls State Park, they put one up. And we do have a few left yet, so gotta find places to put them up this year. And finally, on March 15, in March 2015, we held this regulatory meeting, sort of like a public hearing for tribal members up by Red Cliff in the Bayfield Peninsula. And tribal elders, harvesters, and natural resource people attended, as well as scientists and regulators from USDA and state agencies. And it gave everybody, they got to see a whole bunch of different perspectives than they're used to seeing, and to talk to each other and kind of learn where everybody's coming from, okay? So it was really an amazing day. And I'll never forget it. Somehow, and Paul DeMay, he's founder and editor of Indian Country Today. He's emceed for us, and I didn't get a picture of him at the meeting, but here he is at the Penalty Harvest Camp some years ago, showing kids how to tap a birch tree. They were tapping birch trees and maple trees up there. You can make birch syrup too, just as well as maple syrup. So. And probably, some of these other people like Andrea Distorrent, she's done some great research on people's reactions to regulations in moving firewood and that kind of thing. So anyway, and here are all the people that attended our meetings at the reservations, elders and natural resource people. I'd like to thank them, and there were other people here that don't show up here too. So I guess that's about it.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Steve. Yeah, that risk assessment stuff was pretty neat. I mean, it's getting older, but it's nice to kind of see which factors are the most important, so you kind of keep an eye on that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
Also all of that educational material that's available at the GLIFWC site. Yeah, anybody feel free to go and check that out. Use it up. There's some really great information in there. So thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
And oh, my other computer shut down. Okay, so next up on our list here is Philomena Quebec. Philomena is a Anishinaabe. Sorry, that was a nice try. Anishinaabe from the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa, and a 2008 graduate of the University of Minnesota Law School. She currently serves as a policy analyst for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, GLIFWC, focused on treaty rights implementation. At GLIFWC, Philomena has drafted a comprehensive food code for treaty harvested foods, engaged in intertribal and intergovernmental coordination to update and improve tribal conservation regulations, and advocates for tribal interests in the development of law and policy on CWD, wolves, and land development decisions. Philomena enjoys living in the Anishinaabe ceded territories and spends time harvesting with her 2 children and engaging in community harm reduction. So please, let's welcome Philomena.
Hey, thank you so much. Dang, I should have used fewer words for that introduction, but anyway, I'll be talking about the regulatory side of the project that Steve and I collaborated with related to EAB and other of these forest animals, these forest insects. All right. Okay. And so just to give you a little background on the presentation that I'll be doing, first of all, we're going to just dive into Ojibwe worldview and talk about this relationship that we have with trees and plants. We'll focus in on one of the court cases, LCO versus Wisconsin. and I'll give you some information about the timber decision. And then what we'll kind of end up on is a discussion of the tribal strategies that we came up with for the, for this forest project that we were working on. So, to give you just background in case you don't know, the Ojibwe and Chippewa bands have been in this Great Lakes region for centuries, and part of the work that we've been doing is the extension of indigenous governance and forest management over vast areas of lands and waters. And this is prior to European and American settlement. A lot of the work that we had been doing as Anishinaabe tribes and bands and the nation became frustrated because of epidemics of disease that would wipe out whole swaths of our people. But certainly there was a lot of relationship and tending to the forests within this Great Lakes region prior to any settlement by non-Indian people. So, I mean, one of the things that Steve talked about, and I'll talk about this a little more throughout my presentation, is that trees and plants in the Anishinaabe worldview are thought of as relatives. And, as relatives and as beings, these are trees and plants and animals that are endowed with agency and purpose. They have the ability to make relationships and make decisions. And, I'm going to just direct your attention to this bandolier bag here. I don't know anything in particular about this bandolier bag, but it's done in the woodlands art tradition. And this is a distinctive part of our material culture. This woodlands art that features all kinds of different flowers and leaves and plants. And if you know anything about woodlands art, you always see that these plants are connected together, and there's different types of plants. This one here in this corner over here might be an ash tree. It kind of looks like, the way that the ash has, the way that they manifest their leaves, or maybe over here kind of. But certainly all these different types of plants are all connected, and they have these relationships. When we think of plants are within the four orders of beings, and they're considered older than we are as human beings. Human beings are the last order, the last part of creation, dependent on all the other orders that come before. And these plants, I think of these plants when I'm out in the woods, they're like my grandmas and grandpas, and I can feel that they love me and that they want me to prosper and have a good life. They give us things. The Anishinaabe have countless uses for plant products. And so we're talking about all the necessities, many of the necessities for life in a harsh climate. So shelter, transportation, fishing and hunting tools, textiles, food storage, toys, you name it. We get a lot of stuff from plants. And so, for the Anishinaabe, certainly we also have a system of law that is an older system. Our system of law didn't kind of just come out of our relationships with the United States, but we have this law, and part of the law is referred to as Ina Konigewin, and that Ina Konigewin is it's the highest form of law. And when we talk about the Ina Konigewin, it has to do with all the different aspects of creation, including human beings, and how we received instructions from the Creator about our purpose. And we know that as long as we continue to adhere to our responsibilities and take care of our duties as human beings, or if we're a maple tree, as a maple tree, that's how we maintain our distinctiveness. As human beings, this relates to our sovereignty and our right to be able to carry out our harvesting activities within our traditional territories. So, like taken together, we think about these fundamental teachings, and these responsibilities, these duties, are Ijikewin, like the things that we're supposed to be doing, and our Ina Diziwin. And this all relates to our worldview as Anishinaabe. Steve talked about this, but again, we have relationships with the United States government, and much of the fundamental basis for our relationship we can find within those treaties that we made with the United States in the 19th century. And again, they reflect, they don't create the right of ours to be able to hunt and fish and gather, but they reflect those inherent rights that we have. And because they're within the treaties, the United States really can't get out of the fact that we talked about this, and these rights have been reserved. So, oops, I'm always doing this. So for many, many years, the states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Washington, failed to recognize that the tribes have pre-existing rights. And so they had to sue in federal court. And in 1983, sorry about that. This thing is so touchy. So in 1983, the decision came down that the tribes' rights it continued to exist, and the state needed to recognize the tribe's ability to self-govern in this area. So there was a very long, after 1983, there was another almost 10 years of litigation that occurred in the LCO case. And so, there's the next 3 phases of the case involve the declaratory phase. And this was very interesting. It was all about the history of a lot of work with historians about what the tribes were actually doing at the time that the treaties were signed. So what exactly were they harvesting, and how were they doing that? Were they engaged in commercial activities related to these different resources? And then the next phase was the regulatory phase. And in this phase, the court was trying to make determinations related to how how exactly the tribes could carry out their exercise of treaty rights, and how much of that exercise of treaty right could the state regulate. And so what the law, like the law of the case, is generally related to the tribe's ability to protect the conservation interests and public safety interests of the state. And then if the state can show that, well, the tribe's regulation goes too far and it doesn't protect the conservation of this particular species, then the state could start regulating, but not in a way that would prejudice the tribes. And so it has to be fair, right? And then finally, there was some stuff related to damages, and that's not as interesting to me because it's kind of one and done. This regulatory phase, although it technically ended when the judgment was decided in 1991, it continues to be important to work through because the field of conservation and the field that we work in is always changing. It's always dynamic, right? And we're always learning more. And so, when we as attorneys, when we learn more about the biology of these species, when Steve Garsky tells us all this interesting stuff that he knows about EAB and different things, then then we kind of put that back into our own like legal regulatory modeling system to make sure that the regulations that we have and these relationships that we have with the state still meet up with that conservation and public safety framework that we have. So within that regulatory phrase, there were all kinds of different trials on wildlife and fish, and there was a big muskie trial, and there was a deer trial. And finally, at the very end, right before the final judgment was reached, there was a decision on timber. And this related to the tribe's ability to commercially harvest timber and gather other plant materials from public forests. So this is forests that were owned by state and county governments. We have different things going on with the feds, so this part was really only about state and county governments. The bottom line for the timber decision is that the court determined that the tribes weren't able to maintain a right to commercially harvest timber, but they did show that they, at the time the treaties were signed, that they were gathering all sorts of what's characterized as miscellaneous forest products, and these are specified in pretty fine detail within this decision. So it's this list of products that are right here, including marsh hay. I didn't list marsh hay because I don't even know anybody who harvests marsh hay at this point. And so the timber decision required the state and the counties to provide processes for the tribes to be able to apply for permits to gather these various different miscellaneous products. Interestingly, what was not addressed by the court order is the harvest of whole trees, including ash trees, for non-commercial purposes, so for cultural purposes. That was really left out of the decision. So separately, we have the GLIFWC member tribes have relationships with federal government agencies that manage forests within the ceded territories. And so one of these relationships is a very positive relationship with the Forest Service. We've had an official MOU established with the Forest Service since 1998. And along with that MOU, there's a gathering code that provides for the gathering of all these miscellaneous forest products that are really regulated and permitted by the tribes themselves. If there's an enforcement issue, it's a tribal court enforcement issue. And then there's also a newer element of the MOU is this timber harvest framework. And this has provided for the large scale harvest of standing live trees for firewood and other cultural purposes. There's a beautiful, beautiful community center in the LVD reservation, and that is made from wood that was harvested from U.S. Forest Service lands and then milled and designed and placed into this big, beautiful, gorgeous building. So that's, there's a lot of potential that tribes have in implementing and working on this timber harvest framework. We have annual meetings with the Forest Service, and we engage with them on a weekly basis on a staff to staff level on a whole variety of different topics. So like Steve said, we received a lot of input from our tribal representatives in this project. Terminology of pest and invasive, we were informed right away, is very problematic because these beings are part of creation. They're just carrying out their instructions. And really some of the things that we heard back and what's contained in our report is that, greed and arrogance and lack of respect from human beings is really the origin of the this crisis that we're facing within our forests. And it's really a serious problem because there's so many different uses that we still have from all these different trees. Another thing that I just want to say real quickly related to that TEK is that our teachings tell us that because when we work out in the forest and we need something, we really need to ask permission first, because these trees, these plants, we don't see them as inert objects, items of personal property, but they're considered our ancestors, and we have to ask permission to take them and offer tobacco. And really, it's engaging that higher consciousness and making sure that we are we're doing what we're when we're affecting these beings in the woods, that we're doing so in a way that is respectful to them. So again, with respect to the harvest or the plan that we developed, that GLIFWC developed in this forest invasive response plan, one of the areas that we were focusing in on was education. And the messaging is really about how can our personal actions contribute to or prevent the spread of EAB. So, Steve created all those wonderful materials that were distributed throughout many of our GLIFWC tribes. And so it's really, certainly ash is a very important tree, and making sure that we emphasize that. How can our own actions either contribute or prevent the spread, and also what are those signs of EAB on the landscape, because we have a lot of harvesters that are out in the woods in remote areas, and they can be an asset to us in early detection of potential infestations of EAB. We also identified tribal natural resource staff, and so this is enforcement or biologists or other natural resource staff. They often also have a lot of contact in the woods, but they also have personal contact with harvesters and opportunities to educate tribal members about EAB signs, and also about your role and responsibilities in preventing the spread of EAB infections. Youth were also identified. Certainly tree identification activities, and even knowing what an ash looks like on the landscape is really, this is an opportunity for us as people who care about ash, and as people who care about our forests. We can help raise the consciousness of youth about how our forests are composed. And so we could bring some of this information and curriculum to tribal colleges, and also within K through 12 curriculum. And then, another aspect of the response plan, and this is really a tool for tribal governments to be able to use, is to develop regulations addressing activities that can affect the spread of these so-called forest invasives within our ceded territories. So one of the recommendations that we came up with is to develop a regulation on the small scale harvest of live trees. This was missing from any of our gathering codes, and so this was actually implemented within our U.S. Forest Service gathering code several years ago. Tribal members can take out a permit and harvest up to 6 trees that are larger than a lodgepole. So a lodgepole is about this big. I think it's 6 inches diameter at breast height, and so a tree that's larger than 6 inches is now available for harvest, and that's to promote the cultural activities that our tribes maintain around the uses of, live trees. In this picture here, there's a collection of snow snakes. I was talking to John Johnson last night. He's the chairman of Lac de Flambeau, and I was asking him, what are the wood? What kind of wood do you use to make a snow snake? And he got back to me really early this morning. He had talked to his brother, Greg Johnson, Biscockenay, and the very best snow snakes come from maple trees. But any kind of hardwood will do, including ash. So it's important for our tribal members to be able to harvest these whole trees in order to continue to engage in these types of activities. Another regulation that we had talked about was to set quarantines to limit the harvest of hardwood trees that are located within a certain distance of an EAB detection. And then similarly, set distance limitations on the transportation of firewood. To my knowledge, I believe that Bay Mills and Red Cliff have set firewood importation restrictions in place out of concern for their on-reservation ash trees. But we don't have any quarantines in place. And the concerns that were articulated by tribal representatives is that, first of all, these forest invasives have not been identified as a result of tribal activity. This is squarely non-tribal activity that has brought these forest pests, or excuse me, like these beings, these out of place beings, into the ceded territories. And, we're so restricted with respect to firewood already because of the timber decision. And we have this great new tool, the timber harvest framework, that, is allowing us to provide low cost heating opportunities for our tribal communities. We're able to get, like wood fire for our funerals and different ceremonies. That we're very concerned that, these quarantines, if they get set, and if EAB becomes, pretty prevalent throughout the ceded territories, that it's going to interrupt our exercise of treaty rights. And so, certainly as the federal government has moved in the direction of deregulation, the tribes aren't interested in over-regulating their own membership. And then, finally, another area of strategy is related to coordination. And so coordination on a local and regional level, and also engagement on a state and national level, to really provide for the opportunity for tribes to weigh in on the policy decisions that are being made by on a national level. The local work is really about maybe work similar to what happens with other invasive plant species in the cooperative weed management associations. Focus on detection, probably education, things like that, things that could be accomplished on a local level. And other strategies that have been implemented after this project finalized, we have a seed collection effort going on through the GLIFWC climate change program, and the focus is birch and ash seeds, because both birch and black ash have been identified as particularly vulnerable. And the preservation is going on. The seeds are being, it's a very laborious process, but the seeds are being prepared for storage at the USDA National Laboratory for Genetic Resource Preservation in Colorado. GLIFWC, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, is the owner of these seeds. And then, in terms of biological control, we have heard concerns from tribal representatives, leadership, about the unintended consequences of these different beings on the landscape. I mean, as a Bad River person, I know that flies were used as a biocontrol to address, I believe it's gypsy moth. And those flies make it really, really difficult to be on the beach in the summertime on the South Shore and kind of impede our harvesting and recreational activities. And so, certainly there can be unintended consequences when we introduce one of these beings into a new area. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate. I don't consider myself a rock star in this area at all, but I do have some expertise related to our treaty rights implementation. Miigwech.
Well, thank you very much, Philomena. That was fantastic. And if anybody wants to talk to Philomena more about any of these treaty right topics, her email is in the bio at the end of the agenda. So
Definitely.
that was great. Also, you alluded to the seed repository, and we will be having speakers from there next week. So that's a great lead into next week.
Great.
So now we've got scheduled on the agenda. It looks like a 5-minute break. So if you guys ever can get up and stretch for a second, and then we will come back with our very own Lacey Hill Caster to give one more presentation before the questions. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab at the bottom, and we will get to them in a few minutes. So we will see everybody back at, let's say just 2:20. We'll start at 2:20. Is that okay with you, Lacey?
Yeah. Yep. I was on mute.
Sounds good. Let's see you then.
Yep. I forgot to pause the recording during our 5-minute break.
That's where that editing comes in, huh?
Right, right.
Okay, it looks like it is 2:20. So we're back, and to start us off here is our very own rock star from WCAC, Lacey Hill-Castern. She is the Tribal Pest Survey Specialist and Deputy Director for the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council. She holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in Wildlife Ecology, Research Management, and Biology. Over her career, she has worked for numerous agencies, but has spent the past 11 years working directly with tribes and conservation. So, Lacey, take it away.
All right, I think I'm ready for this. So, hi, I'm Lacey Hill-Castern. Thank you for the introduction, Paul. I'm glad that we can have so many people join us today. We just had a great lineup of speakers, so I'm going to try to keep my presentation a little brief, so we have plenty of time for the Q&A period at the end of today's webinar. Please remember to post your questions in the Q&A box, and then we'll run through those questions as soon as I'm done with my presentation. These sessions are being recorded, and as Paul mentioned, last week's session is already posted on the WCAC YouTube page. And this session should be posted before the close of business tomorrow. So you'll be able to view those almost instantly. Today I'm going to give a brief overview about WCAC and the Tribal Pest Surveys program. This program is just getting started. I was hired by WCAC the summer of 2019. And so the summer of 2020, this last year during the pandemic, was officially our first survey season. So we're really just at the beginning stages of growing this program. That being said, I also want to acknowledge some of the terms pest and invasives that are in my presentation. Philomena did a great job talking more about this, and we have had conversations regarding this terminology at WCAC board meetings. It is currently the accepted and commonly used terminology in the programs and agencies I am working with, but it is on my list of items to adjust moving forward. Non-traditional beings is one of the recommendations that has come forward from a lot of the work that GLIFWC has done over the years. So Tina Van Zyl, the WCAG president, already gave a great overview of WCAG, but just as a recap, we are a nonprofit organization, a 5013C. We were established in 2001, so we've been around now for 20 years. And we are an organization that provides a forum for the 11 federally recognized Native American tribes in Wisconsin. And the mission is to identify and solve natural resources issues on tribal lands. This council really gives a voice to the tribes of Wisconsin on conservation issues at both the state and natural levels. Through this strong partnership, we originally started with USDA NRCS, and the council is able to review and provide recommendations for conservation projects from the tribes of Wisconsin. And tribal conservation advisory councils are actually first authorized in the 1995 Farm Bill as advisory bodies to the NRCS and all of the USDA agencies. WCAG was the first such council formed in the country. WCAG's board is comprised of representatives from the Environmental and Natural Resources Department from each of the 11 federally recognized tribes in Wisconsin. So this slide is just really putting a number to the vast natural resources that the tribes are stewards of in the state of Wisconsin. You know, 650,000 acres of tribal land, where 450,000 of that is forested. So the Tribal Pest Survey Program. Many of you on this webinar today can recognize the picture that is a emerald ash borer purple prism trap. Most of my presentation will be spent defining acronyms. There are a lot of them. So to get started, this program started by building on an, oh geez, sorry about that. That is really sensitive. This program started by building on an existing long-standing partnership that the council already had with USDA APHIS PPQ, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, Plant Protection and Quarantine. And Christopher Deacon is actually giving a presentation on week 4 where he'll be providing a little bit more information about these programs that I'm mentioning. The 2 programs that I work under specifically are the CAPS program and the PPA 7721. So you can see by my slide what that actually stands for. We also use the PPA 7721 funding to support our seasonal worker program, which I'll go more in detail in a little bit. So this is the overall CAPS program mission, and I'm sure there's some APHIS folks on this webinar too that are really familiar with it. Essentially, it's my job to work with the tribes and develop these early surveillance activities that help build the partnerships and collaborations that are necessary to protect these vast resources that the tribes are stewards of. The surveys that we complete are essentially a second line of defense after the port inspections that are already being completed by APHIS PPQ. Currently, our primary concern has been the transport of exotic wood borers and bark beetles through firewood as a way of making it to tribal lands. But there are many other potential pathways that we're exploring, and some are being mentioned in the presentations we've been watching. So here's a quick overview of the program objectives. Briefly, I work with the tribal technical staff to assess needs and concerns to develop and implement a survey plan to meet those needs and concerns that fit under the APHIS PPQ CAPS and PPA 7721 programs. Education and outreach is also an important component of that. I work a lot with the WCAG Forestry Committee, which Paul Cole is the chair of, and help organize these trainings through the committee. Like pre-pandemic in the fall, we had an oak wilt workshop. And then now we have this EAB web series. So I helped a lot with organizing the calls and the planning to get this up and running. Here are some pictures from our past season survey efforts. So like I mentioned, our first year of survey was 2020, started during the pandemic. So we had to do some adapting along the way. even though it was the pandemic was happening and there's furloughs and all these other issues that we were dealing with, we still had 9 tribes that were able to participate in our first season surveys efforts. We were able to collect a total of 140 samples from 27 linden traps. So the linden traps are these green traps that you see in the picture on the right, those green funnel traps. And the samples that we are collecting is in the bottom left-hand corner, you see this bug soup in the cup. So these traps actually have to be checked pretty frequently during the summer, especially after any rain event, because as you can see by their design, they do fill up. And if bugs sit in water in these traps, we use a diluted antifreeze in the bottom, but if they sit in water, they get really stinky. And then they'll actually fill up with stink beetles, which we learned from experience this past summer. So we were using those traps in particular to look for oak ambrosia beetles. We also were able to deploy 71 emerald ash borer traps, and we had 4 seasonal workers that were working with us. They were working on survey, they were assisting with the survey efforts, and they're also assisting with education and outreach efforts, which we had to adapt due to the pandemic. Originally, they were going to be doing a lot of community events, doing education and outreach at a lot of community events, but those were canceled. So this is an example of some of the work we had them do. I had them work on a lot of different flyers and brochures that could be distributed. They also helped develop the very first WCAC newsletter. So these are some screenshots of that very first newsletter. One of our seasonal workers actually developed a scavenger hunt to really help with those first detection efforts within the community. So she wanted something that families could do outside and still be socially distanced. So that's that image in that bottom left-hand corner. So families could use that to go out and see what a sick or dying tree may look like and know more about it, and also know how to report what they're finding as well to the appropriate natural resources departments, or my contact information is also included. In the top left-hand corner, we had one of our seasonal workers was a culinary arts major. So he had put together a recipe on using an invasive plant for the newsletter. We also created the WCAC Facebook page this summer. So WCAC is now on Facebook, and we also developed a YouTube channel. Now on the YouTube channel, we are posting all of these recorded web series, but we also have our intern presentations from this past summer. So I encourage everybody to check it out so they could learn more about what our interns were able to accomplish this last summer, even during the pandemic. Plans for 2021, we definitely are going to continue to prioritize these surveys efforts. We upped our goals from 2020 for 2021. We're going to continue to work with the tribes and APHIS PPQ and working to adopt these pest detection and response plans and agreements. So when we do find something, everybody knows what their role is and what steps need to be taken. So we're going to continue to assess tribal needs, concerns, and plant pest risk. I appreciated looking at a lot of the models that Steve Garski had done in the past. And then also assist with implementing community education and outreach. So we do still plan on hiring more seasonal workers that will be assisting with this community education and outreach. It'll more than likely be on the virtual platform again in 2021 with how things are going, but in hopes that in the future, or we're working on developing more activities for first detection that can occur with families just being outside and socially distanced. So here's some information I want to plug, make a plug for this. Investing in our future seasonal worker program is currently being advertised. There's more information on our website and on our Facebook page. The job description, the deadline for applying is February 15th of 2021. This is a 10 to 12 week position. We're currently looking for 4 seasonal workers. And like I mentioned, they will be working on survey efforts, assisting me with survey efforts this summer. but then also assisting with community education and outreach. I'll also post a link to the job announcement in the chat box during our Q&A session. And another part of WCAG is these committees. So as I mentioned with this web series, this is coming from the WCAG Forestry Committee, and a variety of professionals from organizations and agencies across the country. Really, when you look at the bottom of the agenda, I listed all the people that were on the planning committee and owe them a huge thank you. But it's really that collaborative effort and partnership that really helps get things accomplished. So the WCAG committee structure is comprised of technical staff from tribes, as well as many different partnering agencies and organizations. And we currently have 6 technical committees. We have an agriculture committee, a fisheries committee, wetlands, wildlife, invasives, and then the forestry committee. And with the forestry committee, we have the 6-week EAB web series, but then we've already started discussions to plan a future web series featuring hemlock pests and disease, like looking at the hemlock woolly adelgid and elongated hemlock scale. So if you're interested in being part of the planning committee for that upcoming web series, please feel free to contact me. My email is also in the agenda. And with that, I think we can move on to our Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, Lacey. That was fantastic. A lot of really cool stuff that you got going on, and stuff that other people from around the area can get involved in as well. So, and if anybody knows of anyone interested in a summer job, we've got some available working for EAB and other invasive pests. So,
You want a summer job looking for EAB and other invasive pests?
sorry, say that again, Steve.
Oh, I didn't know you could hear me. I was asking somebody if they wanted a job doing that. I didn't know my microphone was on.
You're
Sorry.
back on, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
Well, did
Carry
we get
on.
a taker or not?
No answer yet. No comment.
All I'm accepting cover letters of interest right now. So real
She's
simple job application.
Okay, she's a retired nurse, so.
So,
Oh,
yes,
boy.
next on the agenda here is the Q&A portion. So we will have Dr. Herb Bolton and Steve Garsky and Philomena Quebec and Lacey available for questions. We've got a few coming in. Please send more if you'd like. There is also the feature to raise your hand, and then Lacey can tag you in, and you can ask your question in person if you'd like. So, are you guys all ready?
Yes.
All right. The first question that we had come in looks like, how did tribes, oh, sorry, this is for Philomena. How did tribes have to show that they engaged in activities at the time of the treaties? Do you know? So
This was a lot of historical analysis that was done, and there's a whole subset of historian work that's related to what tribes were doing at certain times related to these legal cases. I believe that Charles Cleland provided expert testimony and a very comprehensive report. And then also Jim McClurkin. And these guys are still around doing stuff. There's a great book that was published a little bit ago, all about the historical inputs that were used for the Mille Lacs versus Minnesota case. And between questions, I'll go find that book in my bookshelf and show it. I just love this stuff. I think it's so interesting. So that's just a regular popular, account, or, like you can, it's regularly available. You could probably find it at a library or something if you were really interested in that. But yeah, there's historians, and they spend their lives in archives cataloging and organizing and pulling up this material. And then they're oftentimes used as expert witnesses by tribes. And states to either support or contradict the, the arguments of the tribes that they were doing particular things at a particular date in time.
Thanks, Philomena. Let's see. I've got a question, probably for Steve, but Herb or Philomena might have a good response as well. With regards to the risk assessment and the ability of tribes and even say larger landowners or people that have large tracts or something like that. If you were going to think about making a regulation for something regarding your land base, what would be maybe the most important thing to limit or regulate regarding EAB coming into an area?
Herb? I would say the movement of untreated firewood.
Okay.
That seems to be the main pathway right now, and that includes logs or firewood.
Okay.
If it's not treated, it can carry emerald, and it's ash. It can carry emerald ash borer, and it also can carry a lot of other organisms. So.
Yeah, this is Herb. What I mentioned during my talk was that to point out to people that the quarantine that was put in place was to regulate regulated articles in commerce. And so what Steve is saying is, we never regulated non-commercial movement. We've tried through outreach, through several different campaigns that we've had, Don't Move Firewood, because it's been recognized that a number of forest pests can move through the forest pathway, the firewood pathway. I mean, you could do it by moving other articles also, but in non-commerce. But our regulations only dealt with commerce, and that's only what our regulations allowed. And obviously, as I showed you from those maps, because I only wanted to use a couple, but it was pretty clear that those regulations were not able to stop that movement. However, each pest is different, and the flight range, the insect itself, has to be considered, because EAB can fly, a pretty long distance. Just the national movement, and the other thing that just one last thought is that for some pests, even though you may not want to do it, some states they do treatment for pests like gypsy moth. There's registered pesticides, but for emerald ash borer, as such a cryptic species, there are no area-wide pesticide treatments that are labeled, or are they practical, because the larvae are in the tree. There's not a stage when you really could effectively spray. It would be economically impossible to spray large areas to kill the adults, would make an impact anyway, and it would be environmentally disastrous to treat those large areas. So I'd agree with Steve that we need to continue focus on the movement, the non-commercial movement of articles, and firewood's a big one.
Yeah, that's kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Philomena.
Oh, I was just looking for my book. I can't find it. I hate that. Just from a practical perspective, and I don't know if Steve or Herb addressed this, another part of the regulation is just what is likely to be effective. And, sometimes education is going to be more effective than a regulation if you don't have appropriate enforcement of that regulation. Just having something on the books isn't, it might make you feel good as a forest manager, but if you can't really make it happen, then you might want to focus your efforts on something else. I mean, education is sometimes more expensive, because you have to have a lot of effort around it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Oh, Steve?
Like I said, good point. Good point. Both of you got both. Phoebe and Herb.
Yeah, and I agree with all of you. It seems like one of the best ways we can deal with this is stopping the moving of material, and education seems to be a really good way. I mean, from the risk assessment, we were talking about abundance and proximity to the EAB occurrence and human populations. All three of those are real hard to regulate. It's something rather drastic. So I think that is a great idea, which leads into another question that we had come up, and it might be along the same lines of don't move firewood, but how do we actually control that? And has anybody used campground monitors similar to the boat launch monitors that Clean Waters uses? Anybody know?
I know there's people watching, like at the Lake Ogeebic State Park here a few years ago. There's a warden that kind of manages the park. And he had somebody come in with a truckload of emerald ash borer infested wood that they picked up on from somewhere in Wisconsin on the way here. So, and he said he looked a few pieces and he found a few dead insects. And he said that was it. They burned the whole thing on the spot. But, and I know some of the tribes have been watching powwows carefully and confiscating wood. Maybe Phoebe knows more about that.
I know that Red Cliff and Bay Mills have, to my knowledge, they have enacted firewood importation restrictions, but I'm not sure about other communities. I mean, we identified powwows and other events where people come into your community as an opportunity to engage people in this conversation related to EAB and using, like, preventing. The one strategy that this didn't come from us, I think it came from one of our tribal representatives, was to provide that local firewood that's safe to anybody who comes into your campground for a powwow when they come there, as a way to extend hospitality in a culturally consistent tradition, without really saying and maybe telling them you can't bring your own firewood here. Maybe a suggestion to put that on event flyers, like, we will supply your firewood, please don't bring in firewood from other locations. Just because that you can have thousands of people coming to your community for powwow time, or hundreds of campers. So I think that's like a really important thing for certainly tribal natural resource departments to think about. I found the book that I love listed somewhere. I don't know where it is physically in my house. It might even be at work. So I'm just going to stick it in the chat. It's a great book.
Well, that'd be fantastic. So we have a comment from Rachel McDonald regarding the wood movement. When they've done education and keeping firewood local, it's caught on very well. And it's also another way to promote tribal loggers and tribal business within the local area. So that's always great too. And I know here on Stockbridge, we've limited firewood coming in for things like our powwow. That's the main event, main vector. And it's gone very well with, the tribe just providing firewood for everybody that comes. So they don't have to bring their own. It's worked very well so far. So let's see. Any other questions? Lacey, do we have any hands out there?
I have not seen any hands yet. There's a lot of people to scroll through, but I haven't seen any hands.
Let's see. What else do I got here? Well, to any of you speakers, do you have any other things you'd like to add? Or, I mean, we've got a couple minutes left here. Otherwise, we can roll into what to expect for next week.
This one.
McDonald has a question in the chat,
Question in the
or
chat.
in the Q&A, I mean.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. There's, there hasn't been any changes in the crab rule. We have an update. I know that Judge Crabb, her honor, was incapacitated for a while, but she's back on the bench, and this, she continues to be assigned to the LCO case, which is great because she has quite a deep knowledge into all the inner workings of this case. I was doing a little history on her yesterday. I think she came onto the bench in 1979, and then the LCO decision, and she was assigned that case really early on in her career. I think it came to her by 1985 or so. Anyway, the state and the tribes did submit an agreement to the judge before the end of the year, and really nothing to do with plants, but some updates on fishing and hunting regulations, and then just some administrative updates. I mean, when the case was first decided, it was back in the 1980s, where everybody kept paper copies of everything. And now, of course, we have systems for electronic permitting and registration and data collection and all that. And so some of the work that we're doing is just updating those those requirements to reflect the fact that we've been moving to a non-paper system, and we don't necessarily have metal tags for all the animals and things like that. So definitely we're always updating stuff. Always. It's it's a very dynamic system. And, again, we're always learning more about the natural world as well. So, it's it keeps us busy.
Just see a comment coming through from Bill McNee that in Wisconsin here, we're probably due again for a gypsy moth infestation. So discouraging firewood movement can also really help reduce the spread of that insect, as well as so many other of our destructive wood insects. So I guess with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and sticking with us today on regulations and all things going with that. And I'd like to invite everybody next week for week 3, which is going to be preparedness planning. We've got Greg Edge is going to talk about forest stand assessment tools to help land managers prepare for EAB. We've got Colleen Matula talking about climate change adaptation strategies from the US ARS activities. The seed preservation people out in Colorado. Stephanie Green and Jeff Karsten will be here to talk about how to collect seed and how to preserve it for future uses. And then also Carl Etzity will be talking about tribal emergency preparedness planning. So it should be a great week next week. Start getting into the nitty gritty of what you can do to really prepare yourself on your land base. And yeah, so exciting to move on to that kind of stuff too. So thank you all for being here today and talking with us. I appreciate all of your knowledge on the topic. I mean, this is stuff that I'm not super versed on, and it's really, really fantastic to hear it. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, everyone. And as I mentioned, we'll hope to have this link posted by the end of the day tomorrow. So feel free, you'll be able to share it with anybody that may have missed it today.
Thanks so much for inviting us to participate. Really great series.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.